Hi, everyone. I'm Maggie McGrath, senior editor at Forbes. The FBI has searched the home and office of former Trump administration official John Bolton. He had previously served as Trump's national security advisor, and he has been a fierce critic of the president in the years since he left the first administration. The FBI is reportedly looking into a mishandling of classified information, but of course, many people are asking whether or not this search is politically motivated. Joining us to break down exactly what is going on is Jo-Anna Nieves. She is a criminal defense attorney based in Oakland, California. Jo-Anna, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Maggie.
So I just kind of gave an outline of what's been going on, but give us your take. What exactly is the FBI looking for when it comes to John Bolton and his office and his home?
So I think it really starts with what we know about, the 2020 filings and investigation that was taking place related to John Bolton's book and the allegations that there were this release of classified material and the efforts to stop the publication of that book. And so we know for several years now that there's been this concern about whether or not John Bolton has mishandled classified communications and maybe even retains any of that communication in his home. And so where we are right now is that there has got to be something, I think, beyond this prior issue with his memoir that has reignited this probe into that's led to this search warrant being approved and executed this morning into his personal spaces.
So to you, it sounds like the timing is especially interesting because he's been a critic for a number of years. Is the pertinent question why now?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because if there wasn't something additional, I think that it really would be confusing and kind of lean into that narrative that this is retribution or retaliatory and kind of, payback for being a critic versus, hey, there is something that had to be declared in an affidavit by a law enforcement officer that was reviewed by an AUSA and submitted to a magistrate for approval, and that judge decided that there was probable cause, there was a particularity and specificity, and signed off on a warrant to be executed now. And I find it hard to believe that it's only based on prior information. That may be a significant portion of what's in that affidavit, but there's something that is prompting the investigation now.
Now, you just outlined effectively the steps for getting a warrant, and I'm wondering, do we know if President Trump issued the order to start this process? Does it go back to him, or do we not know?
I am not aware of who initiated this. I mean, what we know right now is Pam Bondi and the DOJ have effectively, created this group where they are investigating kind of bad acts throughout the administration and kind of reaching back to a lot of things. We see what's happening with the Jack Smith probe and now this John Bolton thing. It does look like people who have criticized the president are being targeted. At the same time, their efforts are kind of masked by this effort to take down anybody who may be releasing classified documents or doing things, mishandling their position as a federal employee.
So, do you think what they're looking for is proof that he has mishandled classified information, distributed classified information? I guess what I'm getting at is, what do we think he has done that has caught the FBI's eye?
When we think back to what happened with the memoir, there were portions that were published in his book that even the judge that was ruling on the publication issue at the time indicated that he may have kind of crossed the line of putting the United States in harm and maybe even recklessly commented on things in his memoir. So these things were maybe very commonplace to him because he was in a position of high security and access. But the release of those statements and things that he observed may have actually towed the line or crossed the line. And now we're also wondering, okay, did he not only distribute it, but has he retained any of that? Are there documents? Are there files? Are there things in his that he has stored on different electronics that may run afoul of the federal law? I don't know whether or not they're targeting an actual leak of information, but the mishandling and retention alone of classified documentation is a federal violation.
You say mishandling and retention alone is a federal violation. What is the sentence carried with that violation? What is the penalty?
Sure, typically you're looking at up to 10 years per count. So if there's gross negligence in the way that the files were stored or retained, if there was a failure or a refusal to return those files, you're looking at a maximum penalty of 10 years for each one of those violations.
So obviously today, Friday, was just the search. So we do not yet know what the charges are. So any speculation around sentencing is just that, speculation. But if it goes beyond retention, if it goes into distribution, do the years add up? Are we looking at 20 years more?
Yeah, you're definitely looking at more time, and it can be consecutive sentencing on each individual count. I think the major part of this was not only was it mishandled or retained and potentially leaked, but was it also done with an intent to harm the national security of the United States? Because then we're looking at a more treasonous, like serious life sentence. We're at the very, very beginnings of this probe, so it is purely speculative where all of this could go. Right now, they're executing that warrant, and will they uncover any information? If they do, a grand jury would make a decision on whether or not to indict.
So step 1, investigate. Step 2, bring it to a grand jury. Then you wait for the grand jury to make its decision. Is that kind of the order of operations here?
Right. And then that would establish what charges, is he actually going to be facing, if any? And then we would know what's the exposure and all of those different charges combined. Then if he's actually convicted of the charges, we know there's sentencing, and that sentencing is usually based on federal guidelines.
Now, as we get into the motivations behind this FBI search, I want to ask a contextual question, Jo-Anna, which is, how common are searches like these? Are you able to give us some sense of history or context here?
Search warrants in general are very common, very prevalent in probably every type of criminal investigation. What we're considering is search warrants for classified documents. We don't hear it come up as much. And I think much of that has to do contextually with the fact that if we do discover classified information, then we were to actually bring this to a federal court for prosecution, we run the risk of national security classified information being put on display in public. And so the prosecution has to make the decision as to whether, what's more valuable, the protection of national security secrets or prosecuting an individual.
So that's a consideration yet to be made, or did that already factor into the execution of this warrant?
I think it's a consideration yet to be made because we don't know if anything exists that's worth prosecuting and that rises to the level of investing resources, investing time, and putting potentially classified information on display. So right now, it's definitely in that investigatory phase, and we'll see if it leads to anything.
Now, in excerpts of an interview with NBC News released early today, and which will be published in full over the weekend, Vice President J.D. Vance denied that this investigation is politically motivated. He denied that Bolton has been targeted by the administration because Bolton has been a critic of Trump. What do you make of that statement, and what do you make of those who would say this is politically motivated? Is there an easy way to tell?
No, there isn't. I mean, you're looking at two sides of a coin. There's one narrative where it is public knowledge that this is one of Trump's biggest critics. And at the same time, the administration does have a duty to protect and, oversee the retention and safety of classified documentation and information. And so it's that balancing act of which narrative do you want to believe. And I think that, of course, the vice president is going to take a stance that this is not politically motivated. And then if there is information that transpires, I think that bolsters that claim that it's not political, that there was a real, genuine interest in the protection of this classified information.
Is it possible that today's search could have a chilling effect on other former administration officials speaking out as critics against the administration? Could it potentially stop folks who were thinking about going on the record and being critical?
Absolutely. I think that there are, when we just talk about the narrative of where we see things going with critics of Trump, and, as I mentioned, with the Jack Smith probe, and now with John Bolton, and just everyone in general that takes a stance or maybe says something that is not favorable to the administration or the president, we do see that they come back into the limelight in some way, shape, or form. And I do think that those who are more concerned with, reputational damage, or even just their peace of mind and sense of security, will likely have that chilling effect and stay quiet. But at the end of the day, if there are reasons to speak out, then you'll have a few bold ones that continue speaking despite the backlash.
So we've talked about the particulars of this case and what could happen next in terms of process. But as you zoom out and look at this FBI raid of John Bolton's house and office, what do you make of it, Jo-Anna? What does this all mean in the broader context of our politics right now?
My thoughts on it are the administration is focused on making an example. Whether that is an example of people who have been a critic to the president, or if that's an example of, if you don't meet our standards, we're going to come after you. All of those who are, going against national security, or people who are not, handling their roles effectively, we are going to do these inquisitions and hold you accountable. And I think, again, it's this dual narrative of, accountability and transparency versus, are we dealing with an offense that is being retaliated against?
Is there anything else we should know as this continues to unfold? This news is just breaking, but what will you be watching for, and what should the Forbes audience be watching for in the coming days and weeks?
Definitely, I would love to know whether or not anything in that that's pulled from the seizure of evidence in this search warrant. I mean, and it's going to take a while to get through, because there's documents and files and electronic thumb drives and laptops and computers and phones. I would imagine that those are the things that were listed as part of the search warrant. There's going to be this time frame of diving through the data, and then we get this final understanding of, was there anything found? And that's what I'm waiting to see. Was there anything found, and does it even pass muster and rise to the level of what this whole probe was kind of fashioned to be and advertised as, or was this just another or a waste of resources?
Was there anything found? That will be the million-dollar question going forward. We will have to have you back once those results are publicized. But in the meantime, Jo-Anna Nieves, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time and your insight.
Thank you, Maggie.